We get calls all the time, upwards of 500 calls every day on average. That allows us to assist victims who maybe don't have anywhere else to turn, or they don't know how to move forward with those types of issues. We also have volunteers that work under us. They're highly trained, so you can imagine that the minimal staff members that we have in my department can't do it alone, so we depend on volunteers that are trained. So if you do call our helpline, you might not get me, but you will get someone amazing who, if gosh forbid that you would be involved in a scam, you would be able to get some assistance that way. And we also love when people call us before they've been scammed. Maybe you get a weird email or somebody knocks on your door and it doesn't feel right. That's when we want you to push a pause. You can talk to a friend, have an accountability buddy, or call AARP to be your accountability buddy. Criminals often work with a sense of urgency, and unfortunately that urgency may cause people to make a rash decision without bringing it back. A little more about me. I am a certified fraud examiner and an enrolled agent. So my background previously, before working for the helpline, was in taxation, and I was seeing many clients that were being the victims of scams. So that was very frustrating to hear, and the more I saw this happening, the more my heart was called to do Fraud Watch Network instead. I started out as a volunteer several years ago, and since then I became the program manager. So that's how I got started, and it is my passion. So my goal today, even though we have limited time, is to give you a top-line summary of what types of scams I'm seeing, some prevention methods, red flags, and we'll go from there. It's okay. It's all right. So I'm going to start with just talking about the top 10 scams that we have noticed on our helpline. So we get these calls and we track them in our helpline. Our data does go to the FTC, so it does get reported so that the FTC can investigate these things. But with that, none of the data of the victims goes. So we're just simply reporting information about the scammers. Based on what was reported to us since the beginning of January, the top 10 scams are identity theft, imposter business, technical support, and computer virus. As you can see, tech support, sometimes, we are looking for tech support. Fraudulent sales, online dating and romance. Maybe I have to move this. That's okay. Sweepstakes, prizes, and lottery, unauthorized money withdrawals, phishing, investment frauds, and schemes. So while I could spend an hour on each of these scams, I'm going to focus on one in particular, romance scams. So romance scams can start as a simple romance scam. Somebody reaches out to you online and you're dating in that capacity, but these scams tend to morph into other things, whether it goes into an investment scam, like, oh, I made this amazing investment, you should do Bitcoin too, I'll teach you how, or it is, simply, I'm going to buy a house. Would you like to buy a house with me and co-sign with me? These scams do morph into more. So using that information, in 2022, 70,000 people reported that they were the victims of a romance scam. That resulted in $1.3 billion in losses, and that's billions with a B. Billions. Crazy, right? But that's not even the worst part. It's probably 10 times higher than that because people are too embarrassed to report, or they think that there's nothing that can be done about it. So keeping that as one of the fragments of scams, imagine how much money is being lost in scams when you factor in all the other scams that are occurring. Obviously, there are some contributing factors, but like Charles was saying, there's really only one way that criminals are going after people. They want your money. Right? So if you have money, even if it's in your account, it's $50 that you got paid that day, they still want to go after your money. So that's one of the biggest issues towards why people are scamming. So it really could happen to any of us. That being said, there are vulnerabilities. They're looking for you and your friends and your loved ones when you are at a low point. It may be that you have recently gotten divorced, or you've lost a spouse, or you have an increase in caregiving. Maybe you yourself have fallen on hard financial times and you're just reaching out for someone for company. Those types of feelings are what the scammers are looking for to prey on. We've also seen a very big increase in scams with different technologies that have come along. So social media and other aspects are great to keep in touch with your friends, especially during the pandemic. Maybe it was the only way that we could keep in touch with a lot of our friends. It's okay, you guys don't have to worry about it.
This will show better on the screen.
Sure, perfect. Okay. Great, thank you, yay. This will look so much better. Okay, so basically, with the rise in technology and social media, it is great to keep in touch with people, but scammers are finding a way to hack accounts, so even though you might be friends with someone and you're friends in like a private capacity, if they hack that person's account, guess what? Now they can see your account, right? So what's happening is the more information that you're sharing on your social media pages, the criminals are using that information to have their in with you. For example, I like cats. No secret, I have a cat. I think he's great. If someone were trying to target me for anything, they might say, oh, I run a cat charity, and I noticed that you love cats. Would you be willing to donate some money to save these cats? And I might say, oh, that's awesome, let me do that, and just blindly hand over the money, not really doing the investigation to make sure that it's a legitimate charity. So those are things to be careful with. And of course, online games now have a chat feature too, so that has also contributed to romance scams. So next, red flags to watch out for. If you're contacted out of the blue, I mean, really anyone who contacts you unsolicited, you should have a guard up. It doesn't matter who it is. That's just rule 101. But if you are in the dating market and you're contacted on a dating website and they quickly say, you know what, I want to move off of Match.com, now I want to go over to Google Hangouts or another free service, there's plenty of them, it's a red flag that they probably want you to move because someone else has been victimized and flagged them on that site. So always keep with the site that you're on for security references. If you're ever asked for your social security number or any other personal information, don't do it. That's also a red flag. Don't click on any links, download softwares, or complete any forms. Sometimes people will just say, oh, I just need your information to get a refund, click on this form. Well, now you've clicked on a link that might have infected your computer, and they might also be collecting information about you. There's also red flags if someone sends you a check. Say you're getting a job and they send you a check for $3,000 and they say buy your equipment with it and return $1,000. Well, by the time you've cashed this check and you've bought your stuff and you return the money, the check might bounce. So those are also red flags. Additional red flags, they will not talk on the phone or video call. If they're just doing text and email, that's a red flag. If they ask for money, really at all, but if they ask for money in the form of gift cards, crypto, or peer-to-peer apps, I think we're moving to the next one now. And they pressure you, like I mentioned, with a sense of urgency or threats. They may start nice and say, could you do this for me? And then the next thing they know, they're trying to threaten you. They may have sob stories like that, they're in a bad position and they want to be, I recently, my truck broke down and I can't pay to get it fixed. I really want to come see you, but I would, but I can't because my car's broken. And lastly, on this page, what they're offering seems too good to be true. So when it comes down to it, these scams are going to continuously change, but if you kind of think about it does this seem like something that would be logical, and having that accountability buddy will help. The next things that would be red flags are they ask for a code, like a security code, and maybe they say, oh, I'm sending you a code now, but it's really the code to your email address, and you might not recognize it right away. The emails and text may contain poor grammar. They may be similar to the real domain name, or they might say like the website but the number 1, so it's not really still the same website. But these are a lot of the red flags. There are other red flags. Like I said, the scammers are getting very savvy with what they're trying to pull over our eyes, so just staying diligent is a great help. But there is a really big impact other than just the financial side. The economic side, of course, is the tough hit, but there is a hidden side. It's a very emotional side. Losing your money is tough, but feeling the embarrassment, shame, guilt, and every other emotion that goes through this type of a thing is always a tough thing to go through. So this can really affect your appetite, your sleep behavior, and a million other ways, and that's kind of why people don't end up reporting it as much, is because they're going through the 5 stages of grief. So these are some things that we actually heard on the helpline. I couldn't sleep last night because I was worried. I've been sick to my stomach. I'm afraid to tell my kids because I know they will yell at me or stop letting me watch my grandkids. I worry they will send someone to my house and harm me if I stop sending them money. I'm aware now that this is a scam, but I'm so lonely, and the person messages me every day to check in on me, and I'll pay them money to continue that. Now, these are not made up. These are not examples that I made up. These are actual statements that were made to us on the helpline. So, prevention. Take it slow, ask a lot of questions to whoever's speaking to you, and limit what you share. Carefully review emails and text. Always contact companies using the number that's on a recent statement or the back of your credit card. Don't be online searching for the numbers because some of those sponsored ads are also criminals. Do not provide sensitive information over the phone. And if somebody calls you, even if it says the number and it looks like it's the real number, it's probably not. So hang up, call back using the other method on a statement to make sure that you're really getting to the right person. Never send money, gift cards, crypto, anything like that. Conduct a reverse image search if you're dating or anything like that. Even if you have someone that you know, maybe they're like, oh, this person seems great. Just put their picture into a reverse image search and see if it comes up somewhere else. That is kind of great about it. Practice a refusal script. What that is basically if somebody calls you, I know a lot of us feel rude hanging up on someone. It's okay to do that, but if you want to be nice, you can just say, I'm sorry, I can't talk right now. I need to talk to my attorney, my husband, my wife, my dog, my cat, I don't care. Make up an excuse, get off the phone, call your accountability buddy. I also recommend screening your calls. I know that's not always practical because guess what? When you put your phone on there, then the doctor's going to call and you're like, oh man, they called from a different number and I didn't answer it. So if you're expecting a call, I certainly understand why you would want to answer the call, but just be careful in that capacity. Make sure you change your passwords frequently and that your virus checkers are up to date. I know a lot of us are also caretakers, so I'm going to go through this part quickly. But watch for changes in spending. If you're a caretaker, that's a red flag that maybe something else is going on. Watch for changes in their behavior and communication. If they are suddenly, they're used to go to Whole Foods every day to eat and suddenly they're eating ramen noodles, it may be, an indication that something maybe else is going on because they might be giving their money to someone else. Share news articles with them all the time. Keep them in the loop of what's going on with scams so that they aren't, in the dark about what is going on. Make sure you're giving them a lot of frequent socialization and activities. Boredom is in loneliness, obviously it was a vulnerability, so the more you can do to keep them from feeling lonely is great. In some cases, you might be able to get added as a trusted contact. I'm sorry, I'm not going through my thing here as much. And become an authorized user. Now, these have legal implications, which I know my next panelist knows, but if that is something that works for your family, that's also an option. I also recommend having them do an online safety checkup once in a while. You might want to put a sticky note near the computer with the rules, like, don't do this, don't do that, or install a robocall blocking app. So I know that's a very brief overview of everything here. My main takeaway with all of this is not to scare you, as Charles said. We do want people to be aware that it can and does happen to anybody. So if it has happened to you, I'm sorry that happened to you. I would love for you to call our helpline if you need assistance. There's a lot of other panelists here that I know can help with that information too. But these are some of the resources that I would use. And it's also on your light evening reading at the back of the room.
I am an elder law attorney. I've been practicing for about 20 years, and I'm just going to go ahead and put it right out there that when the people that came before me that kind of started this area of practice were coming up with a name for a section. I realized this is not the most sexy name the Florida Bar has to offer, the elder law section. It doesn't make people want to flock to your office. However, just recognize that elder law attorneys do represent people of all ages. I think we get the name, and where that comes from is because we tend to practice in areas that largely impact people as they age. So, or also the disabled. So think about all these things that we really know we should be doing as adults. And honestly, if you're frankly 18 years old, you need to have a durable power of attorney. You need to have a living will. You need all these documents. You just don't know enough when you're 18 years old to recognize that you need those things. But I have cases with disabled people who've had, strokes in their 20s, car accidents. So it's not that elder law attorneys don't represent people who are younger, it's just the types of cases that we tend to handle. But kind of piggybacking on what Randy was saying, I love that idea about having an accountability partner, an accountability team, because I think one of the things that I really spend a lot of time talking to my clients about, and again, not a super sexy topic, but you really need to spend some time getting documents, and by that I mean sit down and have your estate plan, get those ducks in a row. And what I tend to see when people come into my office, if they've done any planning at all, they've done planning for what happens when they die. They have not planned for what happens when they get sick, but they're not dead. What happens when you have a stroke and you can't communicate? What happens if you become disabled? So all of these things are also things that you need to plan for, and you need to spend some time. And sometimes the most difficult part of the process with my clients is, okay, well, who are we going to name in these documents? Durable power of attorney is one of the most critical pieces of an estate plan as far as I'm concerned. And it's the biggest troublemaker every single week. Every single week I have problems because either someone doesn't have a durable power of attorney at all, they have one that's 30 years old and really is not going to work well any longer. Perhaps financial institution is not going to be super excited to see that 30-year-old power of attorney. And they haven't perhaps spent the time to think about who should be named. Just because you have 3 children, that doesn't mean the oldest child should be first on your durable power of attorney. You need to think about the fact that you're potentially asking someone to be able to manage your household, to sign contracts for you, to pay bills for you. So think about who's going to not only have the integrity to do the job, be honest, they're not going to steal your money and, go to Vegas with your life savings, but they're also going to get off the couch and be there for you when you need them. And you may have people in your life that are wonderful, and I will say you're very lucky if you have people that you're related to that you can trust. A lot of the exploitation cases I've seen, people have been exploited by their own family members, many times adult children. So count your blessings if you're among those people who have family members that you would trust that much, but also recognize one person might be great for a medical decision, but not financial. I have relatives that they've got everything labeled. They've got labelers. You go into their garage, and unlike my garage, and I'm not going to go into whose responsibility that might be for the fact that it looks like we've moved in about a week ago and we've lived there for 20 years, but there are some people that everything's going to be just so. And those are qualities that sometimes start to make me think, okay, maybe that's our power of attorney. When I ask people to tell me about your family, tell me about your kids, tell me how well they get along, who gets along with who, are there factions in the family? But if you remember nothing else about kind of my presentation, I would say you need to have a durable power of attorney. because I think it's one of the best ways to protect yourself. But it's also critical that you name the right people in that document. It is a wonderful tool in the hands of the right person. It is very dangerous in the hands of the wrong person. And the legislature went through a lot of rewriting. We got a whole new power of attorney statute in 2011. And you have to be really detailed now in a document like that in terms of what you want to allow someone else to do for you. You also need to recognize that it is effective immediately in Florida. So don't think, oh, I'll just, my son will be able to do this if I have a stroke or if I'm, really sick and at hospice house. No, as soon as you sign it, it is valid. It is valid. So, for me, I see that as a great plus. If I don't want to go to the Verizon store to deal with my cell phone contract, I can say to my husband, guess what? This is fabulous. You're my agent in my power of attorney document. So here you go. Why don't you go deal with that for me? So, somebody can really help you with that document, but they can also hurt you. But one of the reasons I think it is so valuable to people is because we tend to rely, this is the person who, when you really can't get out of the house or you are sick, this is the person that's going to be able, in a lot of cases, to prevent us from having to file a guardianship against you. So, and there's all kinds of things going on in the news these days about guardianship cases, and there's this crazy Netflix movie called I Care a Lot that, it's exciting to watch, that's not the way it really happens. And guardianship, I will tell you, just as a person who does guardianship law, I do not want a guardianship for myself, and I want to do everything that I can to keep myself out of guardianship court. Guardianship happens when people have no power of attorney, for example, and now they're sick. I've had a case now, someone's in the hospital, the electric's been turned off at their house, nobody can get access to the money to pay the bills. Nothing is happening. And so the only way that we can do anything about that is to file a guardianship against that person, because there is no power of attorney. There's no one who has authority to pay those bills. And so while guardianship, I'm grateful every day to live in a country where we don't take people's rights away willy-nilly without due process, but the reality of the guardianship process is that it's time-consuming and it's costly. So if I file a guardianship against someone, I represent of the petitioner, oftentimes a family member. It could be a hospital sometimes that's trying to deal with someone that's been stuck with them and nobody shows up to take care of them. The person who is sick or impaired, or we're concerned that they lack capacity, that person gets appointed an attorney. Then there is a committee of people that is appointed by a judge that goes out to examine the person. So now we've got 2 attorneys that need to be paid, a physician and 2 other medical professionals. Plus, the filing fees alone, if we have to do an emergency hearing before an attorney even starts drafting any petitions, almost $1,000. So I tell people, look, I would figure probably, assuming no one's fighting with each other, you could easily have $6,000 to $8,000 by the time somebody gets appointed to be in charge. So this is why I'm saying the durable power of attorney is so important. And if you want to have kind of an accountability team, that's having these documents, I think, is the start to that. So a lot of people know what a will is, right? It's who's going to get things when you die. Something to keep in mind, wills do not avoid probate. I get that a lot. Well, I have a will. There's not going to be any probate. No, a will is important. It tells us who's in charge when you pass away, who you want to be in charge. And in Florida, couple of rules. One of the biggies is you shouldn't appoint someone who's a convicted felon. That's not going to work. So skip that person. But then you can identify who you want to get your assets. That's what a will is. Durable power of attorney, that's my favorite thing to talk about. That's my favorite thing because it keeps people out of a lot of trouble as long as you do it right. Then you've got a designation of healthcare surrogate. Who makes your medical decisions if you can't do it? A living will. If you're at end of life and two doctors say you're end stage, you're terminal, you're in a persistent vegetative state, what do you want us to do? Who do you trust to carry out those wishes? You need to name someone that's willing to honor your wishes, not what they want, but what you have asked them to do. And if you have a child who would be, haunted by having to make that decision, that's not the right person for that job. Pick someone else. Also want to just briefly mention a do not resuscitate order because I get a lot of confusion in my office about that. A do not resuscitate order is a doctor's order. That's a physician's order. The physician signs it and you sign it, or your substitute healthcare decision maker, so your healthcare surrogate. I have a living will. I do not want to sign a do not resuscitate order. So I'm saying right now, if I stop breathing, I want everybody to call 911. I want CPR. Lots of people have heart attacks and live for many, many years, happy, healthy lives with great quality of life. But there could be a time, and I know I've said to my husband, look, if I and now you'll all be witnesses to my personal wishes. If I am bedridden, if I am incontinent, if I don't know who my family is any longer, if I will never get out of that bed again, I want you to sign a do not resuscitate order, because if I stop breathing, I do not want people to break my ribs to bring me back just to an existence that at that point for me personally, I don't believe is quality of life. But that's my wish. That may not be someone else's wish. I've seen living wills where people say, hey, put me in the deep freezer and defrost me when I can be fixed. This is a personal choice, and it needs to reflect your wishes. And then back to this guardianship issue, because I just want to finish with this. Guardianship in sort of what I do in the private practice arena, this is the tool that I use the most to stop exploitation. So if I have a client, and I've got a couple of these cases right now, and we certainly had some cases after the hurricane with people going door to door telling people they had roof damage. There was no roof damage. They're putting tarps on people's homes, getting them to sign contracts. They lacked the capacity to even contract with anyone. So we deal in the private side with these kinds of situations all the time. And sometimes the only way I have to kind of stop everything is to file a petition with the court to request that the person's capacity be examined. I can it's possible to get an injunction for exploitation. We can get somebody, even if they're living in the house, can be kicked out of the house. Because sometimes it's a family member that's doing it. So we've got tools, but oftentimes for me, the tool to really stop something like that that's going on is going to be guardianship. Even if you've done a great job of estate planning and you've got a power of attorney. So we've got somebody, and I have a case like this right now. Great family, great kids, the bills are getting paid, but Mom is convinced that someone on Facebook who used to be famous when she was a teenager is still alive and has found her, and now she's the love of his life, and he just needs money. And Law enforcement has been to the house. They've told her this is a scam. This is not this famous person that you had posters of when you were a young woman. He does not want to marry you. This is not a nice person. And she refuses to stop. So those are situations where guardianship from the private sector is the answer. So as much as I say I want to avoid it for myself and for my clients, I'm very grateful to have it as a tool, as a practitioner to help people, because sometimes we just don't have a choice. And then HIPAA, just make sure people that you want to have access to your protected health information, that you have those people on a list. Because even though you may have a spouse that would be your healthcare decision maker, maybe you would still want physicians to talk to your other family members. Also, before I stop talking and I don't know, pass the laptop, please, 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 if you're a caregiver or if something happens to you, please report it to law enforcement, because I also do a lot of handle a lot of Medicaid cases. Guess what? If you make gifts to people, it's really hard to say, hey, let me just give away all my money and then Medicaid come pay my long-term care costs. And if I have to do an application for Medicaid for long-term care assistance for someone who's been exploited, I have to turn over bank statements to the Department of Children and Families. They're going to see a bunch of zeros leaving my applicants' bank accounts. I have to be able to prove to them that those were not gifts. This person was exploited. I need police reports. So it's not just enough that now this person has lost the money. This could also continue to haunt them for a number of years. So please, please, please help people report these things to law enforcement when they happen.
All right, my name is J.D. Miller. I'm the Assistant State Attorney. I'm the Chief of the Economic Crimes Unit at the State Attorney's Office for the 20th Judicial Circuit. I've been a prosecutor for approximately 16 years. 11 of those years have been spent in economic crimes. I get all of the microphones.
Good stuff.
So, first of all, I'm the last person you want to see, because if I'm speaking to you about something that's happened, that means that your money's probably gone or something has happened to you and law enforcement has been involved. And unfortunately, my job is to punish the perpetrator. So the primary purpose of sentencing in the state of Florida is punishment. If I can get you your money back, I will. But a lot of times, I can't do that because it's already gone. So I just want to cover a little bit about the 20th Judicial Circuit, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we do in the Economic Crime Unit, and then I have a couple of things to try to protect yourself of some very basic frauds that occur. All right, for those of you from the north, how many of you are moved here from the north? Did anybody move here from Key West and can say they moved north? Okay. So the 20th Judicial Circuit, if you're from the north, usually what happens is you came from a place where you had a district attorney. And so that was the prosecutor in the county where you lived. Here in the state of Florida, we don't do it that way. We divide it by circuits. So there's different land masses that are dividing. And so the 20th Judicial Circuit is the last circuit created in 1969. And it consists of 5 lower counties of Southwest Florida. That's Charlotte, Collier, Lee, Hendry, and Glades. And so that's about 1.4 million people. And your state attorney is a woman named Amira Fox. And so the 1.4 million people, there's a lot of diversity in those 5 counties, as you can imagine. So there's a lot of diversity in the types of economic crimes that I see, from the extreme wealth in Naples to sometimes frauds involving farms and homes in Hendry and Glades. So it's very different. The types of cases that we prosecute in the Economic Crime Unit, we cover all 5 counties. There's 4 attorneys, and there's 3 investigators and 2 support staff. And so what typically happens is law enforcement gets involved in an investigation. They're looking into a certain case, and then once they complete their investigation or when they're partially through the investigation, they contact us, and then they talk to us about how to put it together, and then we will file charges. So our job in the Economic Crime Unit for the State Attorney's Office of the 20th Circuit is anything over $20,000 comes to us. So if it's over $20,000, it's going to come to us. We also have specialties of insurance fraud and elder exploitation, which Ms. Swank was talking a little bit about that topic. And we are required, Ms. Fox recognized how important what happened after the hurricane, that we are required to prosecute all state of emergency crimes. So currently right now, if you have an unlicensed contractor, that is now a felony during the state of emergency. The state of emergency is still ongoing. Governor DeSantis signs a new order every time it's about to expire. So from Hurricane Ian, it's still ongoing. So if you have an unlicensed contractor, that's a felony. We typically don't do cases where there's been a probable cause arrest because that starts the clock ticking. Part of my job, I'm half prosecutor, half working with the detective because we have to put that case together. It's kind of almost like a federal prosecution in some ways. We conduct investigations sometimes from the inception. Sometimes someone will contact the state attorney's office, and if it's a significant enough crime, our investigators will start that case, and we will work it all the way through to prosecution. Some of the common things that I prosecute or that we see in the Economic Crime Unit, embezzlement. So one of the key things with embezzlement is the number one way to protect yourself if you're a business owner is the person who's writing the checks can't be the person reconciling your books. That is the number one rule. The other main thing if you're a business owner to protect yourself is the person who's doing your books, are they taking time off? Because you don't know how many cases we've had where there's been a medical emergency or a vacation, and that's how the business owner has discovered that they've been stolen from. And as the lady from AARP mentioned, these victims can be anyone. We have doctors' offices, we have HVAC. A lot of times people are really good, and that they're very similar in the way they're really good at what they do, but their career is not necessarily business-oriented. We do a lot of Ponzi schemes, unfortunately. If an investment is going to give you 12%, 18%, that's not a good investment. And you would be surprised how many people fall for that. One of the things that we do a lot of as well is racketeering crimes. So racketeering is simply committing a crime using an organization or an association. And so we do a lot of those. If you use a business to commit a large-scale crime, then we can charge you with a racketeering case. Affinity fraud is something that we have to all be on the lookout in our communities for. What that is if I am a certain race, religion, or creed, then it's victimizing someone else of that race, religion, or creed. And that's when I first got started into economic crimes, that's what got me started, was it was actually a group of Jamaican women in Naples who were victimized by a real estate investor. And she would take them out and she would show them different properties, and it was their life savings. And she would say, you're going to invest in this property, that property. And instead, she'd give them a fraudulent deed and took all of their money. And so, and right now, I have cases involving the Haitian community where an individual got up at church, and he would continuously get up at church and tell everyone, you should invest with me, don't give your money to the bank. And some of these people, they gave $5,000, $10,000. For some people, the $5,000, that's like $5 billion. So it's different. And I've had victims ranging from, people that work at Subway to the actual founder of Subway as a victim. So it hits all people. We also do cases involving government and contractual abuse. So unfortunately, we've had some cases. We had a situation here economic crime in the RSW airport, where a contractor had contracted to take out all of for the garbage services and the cleaning services. And he was an older gentleman, and he had friends that he played golf with, and he decided to make those friends he played golf with to be the employees from midnight to 8 a.m. And that's when the airport has the least amount of people. And it ultimately was determined that none of those people actually ever worked there, and he took the Lee County taxpayers' monies to about $1 million. And so that individual ended up going to prison for quite a long time. Ms. Swank was just talking about elder fraud, and it's really hard to see there. But the key thing I want to talk about with elder fraud is just because you're elderly, so everybody likes to call our office and say, I'm 65, so I'm a victim of elder exploitation because this crime happened to me. That's not the way the statute really works. You have to have some sort of infirmity related to your age. So to make a joke, I don't know what side of the aisle you're on, but Joe Biden, Donald Trump, you can debate whether or not they actually qualify as elder under the Florida law, if they can be exploited. So typically, it's a person who you have a business relationship with, or as Ms. Swank said, one of the hardest things in my job, one of the hardest cases I ever did, was to put a mother on the stand against her own son. And her son had stolen her house. And so that's a really hard thing to do. And one of the things that's terrible is nobody wants to be in that position to have to testify against their family member. So I do think it's important, while we all love our family members, it's important to have those documents in place and those protections in place so you don't have to be in that situation. Education-wise, I just want to talk to you very briefly about identity theft. If you're a victim of identity theft, there's a website out there called identitytheft.gov, and that's where you need to go to first, and then go to law enforcement. And when identitytheft.gov talks about criminal use of personal identification, and they have a checklist. So the first step is to call the companies where you know the fraud occurred, then to place a fraud alert on all your credit reports, then report that identity theft to the FTC, and then file with the law enforcement. And it's important to report that to the FTC because they do aggregate that. And I know a lot of times it's hard. So a lot of this money, somebody gets victimized, and it's we have grandparent scams. Somebody calls me up and says, little Bobby calls you up and he says he's in jail, and you wire some money and to bond him out, and it turns out that money goes to Nigeria or somewhere else. Well, when you report it to the FTC, they aggregate those, and if they can figure out, eventually they'll figure out, hey, the guy's in Nigeria, and it can become a federal case that way. So it takes a long, long time for that, but that can occur. And it's also always important to report to law enforcement because you need that documentation typically. I have a brother who runs 3 restaurants in Pennsylvania, and he got ripped off. His bank account got ripped off. And the first thing I told him to do is make sure you report it to law enforcement because the bank typically requires that you actually reported this as a law enforcement issue. One of the key things I have a topic that's near and dear to my heart because of what happens here, especially we have it more in Collier and Lee counties than Charlotte, is we have fraudulent documents filed against people's homes. And I've had them filed against judges, and I've had to prosecute those cases. Florida is what we call open drawer filing. So it means that the clerk doesn't have any duty to check what's filed in the clerk's office, or if you have the UCC, which is non-real estate, they don't have any duty to check that. So if it meets the 4 corners and the person walks in and says Joe Smith gave me a deed to his house, or they file it online, and it meets the four corners, that clerk is going to file it, and then you're in a world of trouble. So the most important thing that you can do is you got to go to your clerk's office, and you should sign up for the property fraud alert. So they'll email you if any documents are filed against your house. It's very important to do. This happens a lot. And one of our most frequent victim is typically in Cape Coral or Golden Gate. And what happens is there are people out there that they will search the web for homes that are owned in Europe. Because a lot of times we have people who live overseas. And so what they'll do is they'll file the deed against that person taking that lot, and then they'll sell the lot. The person using fraudulent identification, and the individual who rightfully owns the lot will never know until it comes time to pay the property taxes. And a lot of times, by the time they come to us, it's been 9-10 months. So it's really important to make sure you check about that. And this, you can do that for anything, for your investments, an investment house, or for your own personal house. And the top thing up there is that's Larry Simpson, and he was played in a movie by Jim Parsons. And the reason why I put that up there is Larry Simpson, he was the prosecutor of Ted Bundy, and I had a trial, and he represented the UCC, and he's the one who explained to the jury the open drawer filing system, that's the way it works in Florida. It's just the clerk doesn't check anything. This was a valid sale. They just check the four corners, and that's all they have to do. Before I get done off my soapbox here, and I'm going a little bit over time, contractors is a real problem. I think all of us have dealt with the hurricane and in different facets. And one of the big issues is if you have somebody you're going to hire, make sure you ask for a copy of their license. And there's a website you can go to, and you verify, you go to the licensing portal of myfloridalicense.com, and you verify that they're actually licensed. And if they tell you they're qualified by someone else, make sure you speak to that actual qualifier. Say, I want to know who you're qualified by, and I want to speak to that person. And just remember, if somebody touches the structure, generally in the state of Florida, if somebody touches that structure, so if I touch the pool cage, I touch the plumbing, I touch the electrical, I touch the roofing, I need a license to do that. So just because you think you're getting a good deal, you might end up paying money to somebody that takes off to Kentucky. We've had several people here in Charlotte County be victims of people taking off to Kentucky, Oklahoma, Louisiana. Just because you get a good deal, make sure you check that they're licensed, and they're licensed in the state of Florida. You have to be licensed in the state of Florida. And because of what a big deal it is, it becomes a felony because of the state of emergency. So this is a very broad topic, economic crime. We could probably teach a course for 2 months, but I hope that I've given you some education. Thank you.
My name is Joe Cataldo. I'm the market president for Cruz Bank and Trust. I just wanted to tell you about the bank. I mean, you might be aware of it before I turn it over to my colleague, Christy Babington here, our BSA officer. Are y'all familiar with Inglewood Bank? Raise your hand. A little bit. I know a lot of people moved down here from up north. All right, well, yeah, Cruz Bank and Trust, we were the old Inglewood Bank. We've been here in town in Inglewood since 1984. The Cruz family is based out of Wauchula, Florida, the center of the state. Took over Inglewood Bank in 2004, and the Cruz banking family has owned many different owns other banks as well. So for Charlotte State Bank, I'm sure you're familiar with Charlotte State Bank, Wauchula State Bank, First State Bank of Arcadia, which is now Cruz Bank Corporation, and Inglewood Bank. Most recently, in September 25th of this past year, we unified as one brand to Cruz Bank and Trust. So we have 19 locations from Central Florida all the way down to Southwest Florida to a loan production office in Fort Myers. So we're excited. I just wanted to tell you about that because I'm sure you've seen the signs here in the area. Who's Cruz Bank and Trust? Well, we're a community bank, and that's us. So, and we're proud to be here. We support the community. We grew up in the community. And we care about the community, so that's the most important thing. So Christy's here. She's going to talk about fraud. We do unfortunately see a lot of fraud. We talk about it here on the panel. We see a lot of fraud on the retail side, on the commercial side, our business banking side as well. It's an everyday thing, which is unfortunate. So like Randy was saying, when you're sleeping at night, the fraud's taking place. So these fraudsters are so smart, you would think they get a job, but they don't want to. They want to do stuff illegally. So it's like I said, it's very unfortunate. So, Christy?
Okay, thank you. So, as Joe said, I work for Cruz Bank and Trust, but I have been with the company now for almost 27 years, and I've been in my title, which is now Vice President, Deposit Compliance Officer, BSA Officer. They just keep making it longer. But BSA is why I'm here to talk to you, and that's dealing with anti-money laundering and fraud. So that's what I'm going to share with you today. And let's see, just click it. I can click, it's okay. And so some of the topics may have already been touched on, so I'll move kind of through them. But basically, the biggest point that I think you've all come to gather is you're a target. The fraudsters are looking to get into your money and get that from you. Generally, they have two goals. It's money or your identity, and your identity then leads them to more profit. So that's what you have to keep both of those secure and safe and mindful of those decisions that you make whenever it comes to that. I didn't fix that. There are a lot of trending scams, and I know you mentioned a lot of them. Ones that I'm going to take this kind of from what we're seeing in the banking world, and it's dealing with money mules, which those are individuals that you may or may not know that you're part of a fraud. You may have accepted a job, particularly, maybe online. You're doing something where you're just processing payments or moving money basically from one place, like a mule would move something from one place to another place. I talk with my hands. So with that, that you could be part of a fraud then. So you actually become part of what that scam is, and you may be getting some pay in between, but you're moving those illegal funds from one point to another. With money laundering, it's all about taking that money from the illegal activity and getting it so that scammer or fraudster can use those funds. And the way they need to do that is to make that trail so it doesn't go back to them. So they're going to move it around into a lot of different places, and that's what they use a money mule for. We've talked about the romance scams and online dating, and then there's imposters with everything. Basically, if you are contacted by someone and you didn't reach out to look for a service or look to give to a charity, most likely it is a scam. It could be where even if you're contacted, it could be the IRS is contacting you. The IRS isn't going to email you, and they know how to spell, and I think as we've mentioned, different things, but also recently there's been a lot of text scams where you'll get a text and it'll say it's from your bank and that you've had fraud on your account, and click on this text to reset your password. That's not from your bank. Your bank will not do that via a text message like that. So it's important to know that if you receive anything like that, contact your bank and directly. Don't use any phone numbers that come on emails or that come through the text. Go to your contact information and use that to contact anyone. Tech support scams are also big, where they will send you something through the computer. You might get a pop-up or an email that's saying your computer has been infected and you need to do these things in order to clean it up and get the virus out. But in the meantime, it may also need, we need your password as well, your online banking credentials. Your online banking has been affected. And then you put that in. Well, they have keystroke loggers where basically they can tell what password you've put in, so then they can go in later and move money. Or they're in the background moving money, making it look like you've moved the money, or that they've given you money when they've actually moved it from one of your other accounts. That's a big thing that we're seeing. So what can you do to protect yourself? And I think we've talked a lot about some of these things, but using security software, not opening emails if you don't know who it's from, clicking on links, downloading files. using passwords that are hard to guess, and using multi-factor authentication when possible. A lot of banks are doing that now, and that might be intimidating. You know, you see that, ooh, what does that mean? It just means a second layer to your password. So you have your password, which is something you know, but then it also could be, if you're using your phone, you can use a fingerprint, or it can use facial recognition, or it could be that it's just some additional, where they'll text you to your phone number a code, and then you have to put the code in before you enter into your online banking. Those layers make it harder for somebody to perpetrate that they're you and get into your accounts. Shut down your PC when not using it. Never give control of your computer to somebody else, a third party. We've talked about not using caller ID to authenticate a caller, and the tech support. And then kind of more specifically for banking, really is talk to your banker. They are your financial advocates. They want to help you. So don't be intimidated if you feel that, you know, maybe you've sent money and you shouldn't have sent money. The faster you talk to law enforcement or to your banker, the better chance possibly there is to get the money back. In most cases, they pick things that we can't stop. Wire transfers, it's very difficult to get wire transfers back. ACH transactions, those are things that move money very quickly. But we have also seen a lot of check fraud, good old-fashioned check fraud. We are dealing with daily at the bank, where checks are being stolen, they're changing payees, they're signing fraudulent names on the back. And so it's something that that's something that's been around since checks, you know, have been in use. And you would think, well, most people aren't using checks anymore. We are, all of us are still using checks in some form, but the fraudsters have kind of honed in on that. And we are seeing those things daily. So make sure you safeguard your checks. Make sure whenever you're mailing out payments, do it in a safe manner. I personally don't leave things in my mailbox overnight. If I need to mail something out, I go directly to the post office and I put it on the inside of the post office. I don't even put it out in the blue buckets, you know, outside. Review your accounts frequently. Online banking is a great tool that you can go and you can review all of your transactions. With the rise in check fraud, we really recommend that you actually look at the checks. You can see images with most banks. Look at the actual check. Make sure it's who you wrote it to, because a lot of the times with the check fraud, they're not changing the amount of the check. The check number is in order. So if you're just looking at the check number, hey, I wrote check 100, I wrote it for $500, it cleared. Okay. Well, I wrote it to Joe, but instead it got paid to Randy. Well, now Joe's looking for his money. I think everything is paid fine, but now it's been 2-3 weeks before I find this out that it went to the wrong person. So that I would really, whenever you're reconciling, actually look at who those checks were paid to. Don't share your credentials, of course, for online banking, but also the person-to-person. If you're doing Zelle, Venmo, any of those new person-to-person payments, don't share any of those credentials or passwords. And so basically, again, scammers are pretending to be somebody you know. They're have a problem or they're giving you a prize. Recently, we've seen people are getting emails about surveys, participating in surveys, and it involves, they'll send you a check maybe for $1,300. You keep $300, you take the other $1,000, you go buy gift cards, you call them, you read the gift card numbers off to them, and if you do it within 2 days, you get a bonus of $200 more. None of the money they're giving you is valid. You're getting a check, by the time you deposit it, it comes back, it's no good, and now you're out the money. So they want to pressure you, they want you to act in a specific way, and I've actually seen some of those communications, and it says, do not tell your bank that you're doing this. It's set right on the letter, do not. So anything you get like that where they're telling you don't tell someone, that is a huge red flag. If you're being scammed, stop communicating with that person. Talk to someone you trust. As we've mentioned, there's a lot of different people that you can have that accountability with, and also, let your bank know, law enforcement as well. We've got some resources on the back that are from the Federal Trade Commission, but they're a great one-stop shop as well. So thank you.
First and foremost, thank you, Charles, for putting this on. We feel like education and prevention is really the best way to kind of stop this epidemic. It's happening every single day. My name is Justin DeVault. I'm a lieutenant with the Punta Gorda Police Department. I am in our community services section for the police department, so I'm not a detective. I don't investigate these crimes. I go out. My job is to go out and to speak to the community at forums like this. Unfortunately, I also do our active shooter presentations for the community. So when Charles called, of course, we jump at the opportunity to even go out and speak to 10 people. So we appreciate you guys coming out as well. So the reason I started with the education portion is City of Punta Gorda is under 20 square miles. We have about 21,000 residents in the city and the incorporated city limits. For some numbers, just as of January to April of this year, just the City of Punta Gorda, we have recorded losses of $1.2 million. And that's just from our residents. Last year, our total numbers were $2.8 million of losses just in the City of Punta Gorda. So if our small city is experiencing these types of losses, think about Charlotte County, the state of Florida, the United States of America. It just grows and grows and grows. So again, a couple of the other panelists have already mentioned this, but actually recovering the money is next to impossible. It's extremely, extremely difficult to do. So again, if we can come out and we can do a presentation and we can educate the public, that's kind of like our contribution, because we can investigate these crimes. Sometimes we find the suspects. Most of the time we don't, because it's either foreign or they're very hard to track. So when I go out to the community, again, our community in the city is mostly the retirement community. Not everybody has social media and Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and all this other stuff. So I spoke to Chief Davis. I said, we need another way to reach out to the community. So we kind of came up with a brochure. It's called a Scam Alert. It's our Scam Alert brochure. It's called Call Before You Pay. So we go out to these events all the time, and everybody says, oh, remember, I had something happen to me 3 days ago. Why didn't you call us? Well, I didn't want to bother you. We don't ever close. You can call us 24 hours a day. Why didn't you call us? Well, I just didn't have time. Call us immediately. At the top of this brochure is Call Before You Pay. If you get a suspicious phone call, if you get an email, a text message, call us. We'll have an officer come out to your house, not out here in Englewood, unfortunately. So if you have any city residents, call us. We'll come out to your home. Charlotte County Sheriff's Office, they're the exact same way. We want to prevent our citizens from being a victim of scams. So we have these brochures. I set up a table in the back. They're on the table back there, so please take one before you leave. If you don't feel like you need it, but maybe somebody does, take a couple. We encourage people to put it on their refrigerator, maybe their loved one's house. Just as a reminder, call the police before you become a victim. Also on the back table, like some of the others, I brought some brochures from the Federal Trade Commission. We like to hand these out everywhere we go as well. It talks about how not to be a victim. It also talks about if you are a victim, how to report it, things that we've already discussed so far, different websites. The biggest question we get, our officers will go to a call where there's a scam, and our officers will provide this literature to them, and they say, okay, you need to call this person and report it here, and call, have your credit flagged through the credit bureaus. And everybody thinks that you make one phone call and your credit's flagged and you're good to go. That's not accurate. So you actually have to call all 3 credit bureaus. They're independent of one another, so you have to call all 3. Their phone numbers and their information are in these brochures as well. So encourage you to go back before you leave and get all the paperwork that we left for you. I also left some goodies, some pens, so if anybody needs a pen, don't leave without one. So another panelist had mentioned the phone calls. It's known as spoofing. So they can call you from a phone number to make it look like they're calling you from your bank. So if you ever hear the terminology spoofing, that's where that comes from. I was actually almost the victim of a scam. I received a phone call one night, about 9 o'clock at night. It was a Friday evening, and it said on the bank, I bank with Regions, I'm sorry. It said it said Regions Fraud Department. So I answered it, and it was a gentleman who did not have an accent. He was not foreign, and he wanted to inform me that there was some fraudulent activity on my account. I continued to ask questions. Everything seemed legitimate. He knew that how many cards I possessed. He said they were trying to wire money from my account to either Oregon or Washington State. Everything seemed legitimate. I got on my mobile app right away. I started looking at it. I said, I'm not seeing it here. And he's describing it's kind of behind the scenes because they're trying to wire money. Somebody also mentioned ask questions. We still do get legitimate phone calls from legitimate organizations. Don't provide any of your personal information. Don't provide any PIN numbers or access codes or your date of birth or social security numbers. Don't provide any of that, but ask questions. I simply said, what was the last transaction that I used on my card, on my checking account? And the gentleman said, oh, it was under $20. Immediately I knew it was false. We just came back from dinner, and it was like a $100 bill. And I said, okay, you know what? I'll go into my bank Monday morning. I'll go ahead and freeze the account. I'll go into my establishment Monday morning, and I'll redo my credentials. And he immediately hung up. He knew I was on to him, and he hung up. So you just have to ask questions. Don't be so quick to pay a bill with a gift card. These scam alerts, when we first had these printed, my first stop was to all of retailers in the city of Punta Gorda. I put these by the gift card racks where they sell gift cards, because people will go in and they will buy gift cards, and hopefully they see this thinking that, okay, maybe this is a scam, and they will call us. I will tell you that the employees at Publix have called us about a half a dozen times where people come in and they'll say, this lady's trying to buy $2,000 in gift cards. We think she's being scammed, and we'll go in there and we'll educate them on it. I always tell this story because the sense of urgency that they put into people is unreal. We had one of our lieutenants, he was in line at Publix, he was getting lunch for the day, and there was a lady in front of him buying $1,000 in gift cards. She was on her phone, and he said, ma'am, before you make the purchase, do you mind me asking what you're buying those for? Is it a present? Is it a gift for someone? And she said, no, my computer has a virus. I'm actually speaking to the gentleman who's going to fix it on the phone. She argued with the officer in front of her that, nope, this is legitimate. I have to pay him this gift card. Ultimately, she did not buy the gift cards, but it took a 5-minute conversation for the officer standing in front of her to convince her that that was a scam. So they are very convincing on the phone. So again, call before you pay. Don't provide any personal information. Somebody touched on this subject earlier. We've had 2 separate incidents, and unfortunately, I was involved with both of them. We had a elderly lady who, we got a call from another jurisdiction. A credit card had been stolen in another jurisdiction in the country. The packages of the items that was being purchased with the stolen credit card or the fraudulent credit card were being shipped to a house in the city of Punta Gorda. I thought, finally, we got one. We showed up at the house. Her house was completely loaded with boxes and packages from FedEx, UPS. She responded to a work-from-home ad where she was going to work from home. They would pay her for her service, but she was kind of the middleman where the bad guy would steal the funds. Somebody's identity was stolen. They would open an account. They would use those funds to purchase items online. It was then being shipped to her house unknowingly that she was part of a scam. She would then relabel it and ship it out. And that's why it's so extremely hard to track this down, because it gets ordered online, it gets shipped to multiple houses, and then most of the time shipped overseas, or it's sold online for a cheaper price. But they're just funneling the goods basically through the internet. The second one was CVS called, and they said a lady came in and she had a declined credit card. It happens, no big deal. She said, your credit card's been declined. She said, okay, no problem. She put it back in her purse, and she pulled out a stack of credit cards about that big. And then she continued to try different credit cards. She goes in there all the time. CVS knew who she was. Again, finally, we got one. I go to her house, and she was a victim of a love interest from Jamaica. And this gentleman from Jamaica would actually had skimmed cards. Skimming cards is basically taking the information off of the card, your personal information and your account numbers, and cloning that information onto another card. In Jamaica, he would buy these numbers, these accounts. He would put them on cards with her name on it so it looked legitimate, send the cards to her. She would then buy gift cards and merchandise and then send it all back to him. Usually over the phone, give me the numbers, that kind of thing. She was in her 60s. This gentleman was in his early 20s, and he was absolutely in love with her, and she believed this. So she continued on. Now she is a part of that scam. Unknowingly, she's also being victimized herself. So I always tell those stories because people don't think that it happens right here in Charlotte County or right here in the city of Punta Gorda. Unfortunately, it happens everywhere. Emails. You get a weird email, dear customer, from Amazon. They're probably going to use your name, number one. It's not going to be dear customer. Check for spellings in the emails. There are always grammatical errors in the emails. And then you may get an email that's perfect. If you take your mouse or your cursor and you hover over the email that it came from, where it says Amazon customer support, wherever it may be, if you hover your cursor over the top of it, or you right-click on it, it will actually pop up the real email that it came from, which is usually a Gmail account or a Hotmail account. So if you just hover your cursor just over that, it'll pop up the actual email that it came from, spoofing the email to make it look like it's coming from Amazon. So that's always a good thing to do. Covered that. Okay, so back in 2022, we had a total of $2.8 million in loss. We had a $270,000 fraudulent real estate sale. $270,000. This one came from internally from the closing company, where it appeared to be the agent saying, hey, go ahead and wire these funds for this sale of this house to this person. Fraudulent email, their email got hacked, and that email should have never went out. But the secretary or the agent doing the wiring wasn't aware because it came from her boss. They hacked the email, they got the boss's information, wire these funds to this person, and like they said, the money is very hard to stop that wire, and once it hits that account, it's very hard to get back. $124,000 by one person on a pop-up ad on their computer. So one person transferred $124,000 in funds to a scammer. $81,000 on a Samsung warranty scam. So somebody thought they were getting a Samsung warranty through their email or an online ad, ended up losing $81,000. $126,000 on a pop-up ad for cryptocurrency. That seems to be the trend these days. They're putting these Bitcoin machines out in the public, and the scammers will call them. It's investing, it's this, it's that, the other. Go to this Bitcoin machine, transfer the funds into this account. It's virtually impossible to get the Bitcoin back. Extremely, extremely difficult. Largest case. Okay, so as far as banks go, we had a lady in the city of Punta Gorda. She was worth a lot of millions of dollars. She was being scammed where she would send about $1 million a year to fraudulent criminal organizations. But they were scamming her. She won the lottery. She won a Jaguar. She actually took her car and gave it to somebody who needed a car because she says she won a Jaguar and they were going to be shipping it to her house. And then she didn't have any car. The banks, she actually went through 3 different banks where the banks had said, and we told her as well, you're helping with the criminal organizations and even terrorist organizations. You have to stop this. You have to stop funding this. She wasn't to the point where she needed a power of attorney. She kind of had all of her faculties, and she did her own banking, and she lived on her own. But ultimately, the banks backed away from her being a client because ultimately that money was helping fund terrorist organizations. So, and that's kind of, we work very closely with banks. We work very closely with the state attorney's office. Again, that's always a case I like to talk about. We had one victim in the city lose $1.7 million, almost $1.8 million. Another big scam we have these days is your grandson or granddaughter has been in jail or been in a car crash. We just had one recently for $254,000. Your granddaughter was in a car accident, and you have to pay this amount of money or she goes to prison. It's a sense of urgency. Instead of hanging up the phone and calling their granddaughter, they pay this money, and they're out of it. They're out of the money. So, again, these are just some of our cases. Unfortunately, scams and fraud in the city of Punta Gorda is our #1 call for service. We go to calls for scams and frauds more than any other call in the city of Punta Gorda. And I think that's, when I go to these events, I always talk, because our residents will say, yeah, but we're such a safe community. That's exactly why. We are a safe community. We are a retirement community. People like to leave their house doors open, unlocked. They leave their car doors unlocked. They leave their keys in the car because we are one of the safest cities in the state of Florida. Unfortunately, the bad guys know these things, and then these are the communities that they prey on. So again, it's very difficult to recover these funds, but if we can go out and educate people and try to prevent this from happening, we think it's a win for the good guys. So thank you, Charles. Thank you all for coming, and I appreciate you listening.